have cleared.
Sir, give me a moment. I quickly want to cut across to the Pathankot Air Base. We are getting images of Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, India's hero, flying with Air Chief Marshal B.S. Dhanoa, two of ace fighter pilots of the Indian Air Force. They are now flying towards a MiG-21. This is Wing Commander Abhinandan, who shot down a Pakistan Air Force F-16 in February, when that Pakistan Air Force F-16 tried to respond after India's airstrikes, successful airstrikes at Balakot. Now this is the flying room, their final briefing before they take to the cockpit. MiG-21 fighters is what they're flying at the Pathankot Air Base along India's western borders. This is the final shaking of the hands with the crew on ground. This is the ground staff. First, the Air Chief Marshal B.S. Dhanoa, flying pilot, an ace pilot himself. He's flying a MiG-21. And then Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. Ace MiG-21 pilots, both of them. MiG-21s are the backbone of the Indian Air Force. Almost half the Indian Air Force fleet are these extremely versatile, extremely potent, those small fighter jets. They came into the Indian Air Force in the 1960s vintage, and this is very interesting. This is a part of the standard operating procedure. Before a pilot flies the aircraft, he checks the aircraft, the final checks. Of course, there are engineers who conduct the checks, but the pilot, before he sits and straps himself in the cockpit, he does all the final checks himself, because in the sky, it's only the pilot and the machine. So this is standard operating procedure, and every fighter pilot does this. I want to bring in my colleague Shiv Arur. Shiv, these are outstanding images. Anyone who loves to see fighter planes, anyone who loves to see flying, looks at these images, and this will give him goosebumps, Shiv.
You know, these are really, really amazing images, Gaurav. I just want to first explain to our viewers precisely what they're looking at here. This is the Pathankot Air Base, which happens to be one of the Indian Air Force's frontline air bases, not very far from the Pakistan border. The aircraft that both Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman and the Air Chief B.S. Dhanoa are flying is a MiG-21 jet. Very, very symbolic. It's our oldest jet, but it also acquitted itself with a great amount of glory during the recent air skirmish after Balakot on the 27th of February. Now, the symbolism in this particular flight, Gaurav, is very significant. This happens to be Abhinandan's, one of his first returns to the air, since the air skirmish in which he shot down a Pakistan Air Force fighter and was shot down himself. And this happens to be one of the last flights by Air Force Chief B.S. Dhanoa before he retires at the end of this month. Remember, both of these men happen to be combat pilots. Both of them happen to be MiG-21 pilots. B.S. Dhanoa himself has flown combat sorties. As you well know, Gaurav, he flew them during the Kargil war over Tiger Hill.
Yes.
B.S. Dhanoa himself has dropped bombs during the Kargil war, and Abhinandan, strapped into that MiG-21 alongside him, is a meeting of two combat pilots. The senior most, the Air Chief, and Abhinandan, the recent war hero, who was awarded a Veer Chakra just recently for his heroism on the morning of February the 27th. The aircraft they're flying, Gaurav, is a MiG-21. As you and I both know, it's an aircraft, that has had a long and sullied reputation for a series of accidents, but that has changed in public view since February. It may be one of India's oldest fighters, it may have a troubled reputation, but it is an aircraft that, conducted itself amazingly in the face of technologically superior fighters from Pakistan on the morning of February 27th. These particular pictures, I want to talk our viewers through these pictures, depict Abhinandan and Air Chief Marshal Dhanoa being strapped into the MiG-21. You can see Abhinandan, he's being strapped into the back cockpit, the rear cockpit of the MiG-21. Dhanoa is being strapped into the front. They're both completely qualified pilots, Gaurav. They both fully capable of flying the MiG-21 by themselves. But this is a team effort, a symbolic effort of both these pilots, young and old, flying this amazing aircraft.
Oh, absolutely. Fascinating images these as we see that very, very versatile MiG-21. It's a small aircraft, but this is an aircraft that has acquitted itself so well in every conflict. 1971, Kargil. I also want to bring in Air Marshal Pandey, who joins us, veteran, joins us on the broadcast. Air Marshal Pandey, when you look at these images, what comes to your mind? The final, the final briefing, the pilots being strapped before taxiing and takeoff. Air Marshal Pandey.
First of all, I must say that the youngster did a wonderful job, Abhinandan, when he shot down the F-16, and of course, unfortunately, he was shot down by another enemy aircraft. But that happens. That's nothing unusual. But the good thing was that he was returned to his parent country very soon.
Yes.
And that, I think, was really reassuring. But the uncertainty was whether he had suffered any damage or injury to his spine during the ejection.
Yes.
Fortunately, detailed medical examination proved that he had no injuries. He was quite fit to fly again. So he was posted back to a fighter squadron. And just to reassure the Air Force,
yes,
I think this demonstration flight has been undertaken by the chief.
Oh,
himself.
absolutely. Sir, stay with me for a moment. So this is when they check. This is where they're checking their audio communication, their wireless communication. They're also checking on oxygen. Let me also bring in Air Marshal Manmohan Bahadur joining us on the broadcast. And Air Vice Marshal Bahadur, this is a very important message that is being sent out, not just to the Air Force family, but to the country at large and to those across the border. Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, once again back in the cockpit, strapped and ready to take off. Air Vice Marshal Bahadur.
That's correct. This is important messaging and signaling to the fact that the young officer is back and in the cockpit, is endorsed by the Air Chief, by none other than the Air Chief himself. And both of them are carrying out, they had just carried out the pre-flight checks, as we all saw. And after the pre-flight checks, now these are the checks going on before they start. So this is very important from a psychological point of view, and to tell the other side that our hero is back, and the fact is that life continues as normal in the Air Force, and he's back into squadron flight, and the chief is leading from the front.
Oh, absolutely. And a very important message, Shiv, that will go out. And Air Vice Marshal Bahadur and Air Marshal Pandey, stay with me on this conversation. A very important message, Shiv, that's going out to our friends across the border, that they may not acknowledge they've lost a fighter pilot. Pakistan lost a fighter pilot. They're too scared to admit it. They've lost an F-16. They're too scared to admit it. But in India, we fly our pilots and our aircraft in style, and even a MiG-21. That's a wave that comes in. But Shiv, take it away.
You know, Gaurav, these pictures are so symbolic. I can imagine everyone in Pakistan from the DG ISPR upwards and downwards glued to these images because they'll be wondering what to do next. You know, when the story broke a few days ago, Gaurav, that the Indian Air Force chief would be flying with Wing Commander Abhinandan, Pakistan actually reacted trying to preempt it, announcing that on the 6th of September, that's in a few days from now, they will be holding an honor ceremony for their own pilots. Remember, Pakistan has laughably tried to suggest that the Pakistan Air Force also shot down a Sukhoi 30 jet in addition to the MiG-21 that Abhinandan was flying. But, you know, they haven't managed to present any of those pilots. Now they're going to try and do that in a very reactive, haphazard manner. Pakistan's own lies have been exposed repeatedly in terms of not just the cover-up of the aircraft that they shot down, but the cover-up of Balakot and the laughable suggestion that they shot down 2 aircraft instead of 1. So while Pakistan has hidden their pilots, hidden their dead pilot, Gaurav, you know, the do pilots, or the dusra banda as we call it here in India,
yes.
India has never hidden anything. not only did Wing Commander Abhinandan get decorated with a Veer Chakra, but he's back into full-time flying operations. He's flying with the Air Force Chief. He's been officially credited, as we reported first, Gaurav, with the Pakistan Air Force fighter kill.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
there on his official
Shiv,
combat
stay with me
record
for
as
a
well.
moment.
So there's
What
no
a
uncertainty
shot.
here.
Shiv, what a magnificent shot, front shot of the MiG-21. Air Chief Marshal P.V. Naik joins me on the broadcast. Air Chief Marshal Naik, as a former fighter pilot, what goes through your mind when you see these images? The final checks of the rudder of the aircraft before the takeoff, before the taxiing and the takeoff, sir. Air Chief Marshal Naik, sir.
Firstly, I think this is a trainer action.
It is.
Yeah, the visuals are beautiful. I think this is one of the airfields up north, very, very familiar. I've operated here, commanded a squadron here, the Warriors. He's flying with the Warriors actually. Which is
He is Pathankot, it is, sir. You're absolutely right, sir.
Yeah, and Warriors, I'm very fond of the squadron. In fact, it's a very great moment. Firstly, because the chief is flying, which is one of the great things. The second thing is, he's flying with Abhinandan, I'm told.
He's flying with Abhinandan.
The guy who shot down an F-16. So both ways, it's a very great moment. And the third thing is he's flying third, and the best thing is he's flying with my squadron. It gives me great pleasure.
It gives you great pleasure. What message does this send out to the Indian Air Force, to the country, and across the border, sir?
It's a very, very fine moment. I don't think it is meant to send any messages. Both of them are going to enjoy themselves thoroughly. And it's a beautiful moment.
And usually this would be about a 20-minute long sortie in your appreciation, Air Chief Marshal Naik?
Let's stretch it to 30 minutes here. Let the old man do some aerobatics with the youngster.
Absolutely, they should be up for about 30 minutes, you say. They should. So, what would the maneuvers be like once they're flying? They're flying. One man who's flown for more than 3 decades, the Air Chief. Another man who shot down a Pakistani F-16. Air Chief Marshal Naik, what would they be doing once they're airborne? What maneuvers?
Abhinandan will keep shut because he's flying with the chief. The chief is used to this aircraft, so he'll do a little bit of aerobatics, little bit of handling, and then come in for circuits, which is most important. Takeoff and landing becomes critical. Baki, once you are in the air, Type 96 and Type 75 are almost the same.
Oh, absolutely. But you're absolutely right. Takeoff and landing especially, very difficult. And correct me if I'm wrong, sir, your landing speeds are about 290 to 300 kilometers per hour on a MiG-21. Extremely difficult.
Little more, 300, 320.
300, 320 kilometers per hour is the landing speed. And on other aircraft where you have more redundancies, it's usually 250 kilometers per hour when you come into land for a Jaguar or a Mirage, sir.
Yeah, some of them.
Some of them. Oh, let's enjoy this magnificent image. Shiv, it's not a very easy aircraft to fly. 1960s when these aircraft came in, of course they kept coming in even much later, but very few redundancies. So you really need to be a great pilot to fly a MiG-21.
You know, Gaurav, for all the troubled reputation that the MiG-21 has suffered, you know, for all the sobriquets that it has got, you know, the Widowmaker or the Flying Coffin, all you need to dispel that notion is to speak to any MiG-21 pilot. If you find a MiG-21 pilot, in the first 5 minutes, you will be completely persuaded that it is probably the greatest aircraft ever built. Not only has it been a very forgiving aircraft in the air, and I'm not talking about the accident rates, that's probably because of the number of hours it was flown and the numbers in which it was inducted. But the MiG-21 itself has been an extremely nimble fighter, difficult to land, of course, like you rightly pointed out, Gaurav, because of its inordinately high landing speed, short little stubby wings. But the fact that it had a front profile that made it very, very difficult to see, made it a formidable, dogfighting machine, an aircraft that was highly agile, an aircraft that was extremely quick to maintain and quick to get into the air. So its scramble availability was hugely high, and that's one of the reasons why these aircraft are still on frontline service in Jammu and Kashmir and other frontline air bases across the country. They're very quick to get into the air. Their scramble rate is extremely high. They're easy to operate in their upgraded form, in the Bison form. They bring to bear a pretty capable air intercept radar, as well as quite capable weapons, including the R-73 that was used to bring down the Pakistani fighter on the 27th of February, Gaurav. So this fighter has found a great deal of admiration in the public view since February the 27th, Gaurav.
And
an aircraft that has arguably gotten a bad reputation. But
yes, but
these pictures are a reminder to everyone.
It flies so much that the accident rates are automatically higher. It flies much more than the other aircraft. It's also much in Indian Air Force in much larger number.